We continue on with books 3 and 4 of the Iliad by Homer. There are again more characters that are introduced into the story, and I do encourage you to continue to add to that list or family tree so that you can remember and keep track of all of the new characters as well as the themes that are introduced. One of the most prominent characters in the Trojan army is Paris, and he's also referred to as Alexandros. So if you read either one of those names, it means Paris. He is the abductor of Helen, remember the wife of Menelaus, and basically the cause of the war. Aphrodite is the goddess of love as well as the mother of Aeneas, and she is basically the patron saint of Paris and of Helen because it is her doing that has caused this relationship to begin with both of these characters, Helen and Paris. Helen is the wife of Menelaus and, of course, the mistress of Paris. And had it not been for this spell cast on Helen by Aphrodite, the relationship would never have reached the heights that it did. Thus, the war may not have been caused. Priam is the father of Paris as well as Hector, and he is also the king of Troy. The book continues with the Paris challenging Menelaus to a duel, but he retracts the offer. And this is a character trait that is going to become synonymous with Paris. He is not the diligent warrior that his brother Hector is, but he is more of a coward who has good ideas, but not necessarily the means and the backbone to follow through with them. Hector gets onto him for being a coward because he leaves the war, or basically he'll go off and hide, or Aphrodite will skirt him away if she sees that he is in any kind of danger, and he does re-enter. And when he does, he decides that there needs to be a duel, and as they are doing this, both sides lay down their arms for the duel. And this is more than just both sides deciding to call it quits and let these two gentlemen duke it out, but it basically goes and it stands for this code of honor that they live by. And the code of honor is basically an unspoken and more of an unwritten law of being a gentleman that almost all of the men of that day adhere to. And it was decided that the winner of that duel would be the one who keeps Helen. And I do say keeps in quotation marks because it's more of the men would get to decide what is going to happen to her. And this is going to be a recurring theme that we will encounter with those ideas of gender roles. And so that is something else to keep and watch, that, we have mentioned before, as in books 1 and 2, that women were often viewed as war prizes, and that's basically the same way that Helen is viewed here. Within this duel, Menelaus inflicts Paris with a small wound, and then Aphrodite comes to the rescue and takes him away. Because Paris at that time is nowhere to be seen, Agamemnon declares Menelaus the victor. And it would seem that the war then should be over and everybody could go home. But remember, we are starting in the middle of this story. We're in the 9th or the 10th and final year of this war. The people have been fighting, the men have, for 9 years. And it's not going to go away that easy. So in book 3, we have the idea that Hector represents the Trojan opinion. Everybody is tired of the coward-like actions that are representative of Paris. And Hector, and this is something that we can follow through the next few books, throughout the entire poem as a whole. Hector is duty-bound, which is to the contrary of brotherly love, and duty bound to his country and the idea of brotherly love, but is the contrary idea as to what Paris is, because Paris does not have this idea of responsibility that Hector has. The duel between Menelaus and Paris is basically a microcosm of the war. And a microcosm is something that is a smaller part that represents the whole. And it is, a small representation, almost like a diorama of what this whole war is. You have the Greeks fighting the Trojans, so you have Menelaus fighting Paris. And this whole idea here, it basically represents the war as a whole. We are continually seeing the conflicting emotions of Helen while she, and this is part of, again, the spell that they are under by Aphrodite, while she is with Paris, she cannot resist him physically, but when she is away from him, she regrets and is deeply remorseful of her actions and despises him and thinks that he is a coward as well. And then these ideas of women's roles. Helen is an item to be possessed, basically a trophy, and is, like many other women, is controlled by the gods and men. When we get to book 4 of the poem, we meet Pandaros, who is a Trojan who breaks the truce by shooting an arrow, and this is basically on behalf of the gods to keep the war going. And then Machaon, who is a healer who treats Menelaus's wounds. And I mentioned these names, not all of them are as monumental, but just know that they do play an important part within the story. In book 4, we have a meeting of the gods, and they are going to discuss the outcome of the duel. Zeus recommends ending the entire war. Everybody is tired of it, and they want it to be over. But Hera and Athena are just hell-bent on destroying Troy. They argue against one another, against a truce. Neither one of them wants all of the action to be stopped. Athena is sent to provoke further fighting, thus spurring Pandarus to shoot the arrow, and that is what keeps all of the men were stopped at that time. They weren't going to fight anymore. Both sides, we're living by this code of honor, but that's not good enough for the gods. They are not ready for this war to be over. So the arrow goes off, and the whole attempt for that would be to kill Menelaus. However, the arrow is not fatal, but the mission is accomplished and both sides are now fighting. Thus, the story continues. The war is not over, and this all goes back to another larger theme that you will be able to follow throughout the entire book, is that the gods are continually manipulating the earthly creatures, the humans, these mortals. So it's more of the mortals being a pawn and just little chess pieces in this larger game that is, what humans call life, but is just nothing in essence to the immortals.